Listen, webinar marketing is not dead, but how you market, how you structure webinars has changed. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I am Ebony Evaughn, your go-to business operations strategist, here to help you grow your business through people and processes. Today, I am back with another webinar marketing video for you. And today, I'm going to break down what has changed when it comes to webinar marketing, marketing them, how you structure your webinars, and all of that in this video. So just for a little bit of context, when it comes to selling high ticket services, digital products, whether that's a $5,000 coaching package, whether that's a $2,000 online course, one of the most effective ways to get sales to this day is still webinar marketing. But how you structure and market your webinar is going to be different in the age of AI, in the age of short form content, where attention spans are getting shorter. So you have to create a webinar that is going to be more impactful in a shorter amount of time. So in this video, I'm going to tell you my best practices that I have implemented with a lot of my clients for how to increase your webinar's performance and structure it so it's competitive in today's landscape. First up, I want to talk about your webinar scheduling. And personally, for me, I have always found greater results when I schedule my webinar, even if it's evergreen and I schedule it where it goes on autopilot once a week or every few days. It has always yielded more success for me than when I use on-demand or what's known as just-in-time webinars. And one of the things that I'm noticing a big shift now is a lot of entrepreneurs are starting to slowly transition back to doing live webinars, or at the very least scheduling them. Now, I know you may be thinking, what's the difference between live and scheduled? So a live webinar, in my opinion, my definition is when you are literally doing your webinar presentation live, whether that's daily, weekly, whatever it is, you actually show up at that time and present your webinar each and every time. A scheduled webinar event is when you take your live presentation and you turn it into an evergreen webinar. Even though it's evergreen and it's available ongoing, you still schedule it to actually be available at specific times. So you can have a scheduled webinar that happens every Thursday at noon, or at every Tuesday at 7 p.m., right? So you're scheduling it even though it's evergreen. So in my own personal experience with just-in-time webinars, they have never been effective for me in my own business, because I noticed that with just-in-time, you're giving people immediate access. Okay, they enter their contact information and then it's like, oh, the webinar starts in 15 minutes. Most people are not expecting to come to this hour-long workshop within the next 15 minutes, right? So unless they have the free time or the flexibility or the urgency to say, oh, I have to change everything that I'm doing to attend this webinar, they're most likely not going to do it. And even if they do, they don't typically stay until the end, which if you're making a sales presentation at the end, it's kind of important for people to be there, right? So that's why in my own business, I have never really gravitated towards or used the just-in-time webinars. So what I have seen that is effective, if you're going to do a just-in-time or on-demand webinar, is to structure it as a replay. So people know that they're getting a replay of a presentation that has already happened in the past, but not only position it or framing it as a replay, but you let them know that it's a limited time replay and it will be expiring, whether that's in 3 days and 24 hours or whatever it is. You have some type of urgency to push people to go watch your presentation sooner rather than later. So yes, in today's marketing landscape, webinars are still effective, but scheduled or live presentations are converting better than the on-demand or just-in-time webinars of the past. The next big shift when it comes to webinar marketing has to do with your actual presentation. Now, I have been in the webinar marketing world for years at this point. I think I started doing webinars in like 2015, 2016, and I have made hundreds of thousands of dollars by following Russell Brunson's perfect webinar script, right? And typically that's what most people follow. They've probably modified it somewhat over time, but typically most people follow the perfect webinar script, in which most webinar presentations would be structured between like 45, 50 to 60 minutes. And in today's landscape where attention spans are short, you also have the rise of AI. You have to change your presentation in a few different ways. So obviously you want to make your presentation shorter, but the content of your presentation needs to be something that is going to compete with AI, right? So what I want you to think about is, instead of waiting a week for a webinar to come and then getting 3 secrets to grow your business or lose 20 pounds or book your own travel, nowadays people can literally just go to ChatGPT or Claude and say, hey, chat, how can I book my own solo trip? How can I lose 20 pounds in 90 days? How can I start an online business doing X, Y, and Z? And they can get a response within minutes, if not seconds. So there's not really a huge value add for people to wait a week to go to a webinar to learn these things when they can get that answer in a matter of minutes. So the actual content of your webinar needs to be something that isn't something people can consume readily through AI quicker. And that may look like having more interactive webinars where you're helping people to diagnose something or with a diagnostic, or you're helping them to make a decision. You're showing them your exclusive framework or exactly and a specific approach for how to do something, right? Those are going to be topics and webinar structures that people are going to be willing to wait for. So there needs to be a huge value add and incentive for people to still want to come to webinars. In addition to that, because there's so many distractions, because attention spans are shorter, the actual package of that presentation has to be shorter as well. So what I have been telling my clients right now is, when you're creating your webinar, you don't want to go over 45 minutes. Like before, the goal was to create a webinar that was at least 45 minutes to an hour. Now I'm telling my clients, try not to go over 45 minutes if you can. And honestly, if you can get your webinar down to 30 minutes, that is even better. And so because the actual presentation is shorter, this impacts the amount of information that you're giving them in the actual webinar presentation, right? So if you follow the traditional perfect webinar script, typically in your presentation, you would focus on 3 things that you wanted to share, whether that's 3 secrets, whether that's 3 beliefs or objectives that your people have to overcome. But in today's landscape, because your presentation is much shorter, you don't have time to go into 3 different things. So I've been telling my clients to focus on the one thing. What is the one pain point, the one objection, the one obstacle that if your clients got over that, that would lead them to the result that they want, right? So instead of doing 3 things in a webinar, I would tell my clients, you could create 3 different webinars that each teach people one thing versus doing all 3 in one presentation. And because you're only focusing on one thing, that's also going to help you to shorten your webinar and make it 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes versus it having to be an hour long. Now, this is going to take me into the next big shift when it comes to webinar marketing. So because your presentation is much shorter, you don't have time to do the full out presentation structure that people used to do when it came to doing your rags to riches story, your hero or halo story, right? you have to get into that sooner. And so what I have been doing for my clients is we actually take what would normally be in that intro phase of an actual webinar presentation, and we start that in the pre-webinar funnel, whether that's in the pre-webinar emails that people get, whether that's in the social media content that we create. So instead of getting into your rags to riches story in the beginning of the webinar, you would actually do that in an email, or maybe you have an Instagram reel or a TikTok video or a blog post where you actually do that introduction. So you're already building that rapport. You're letting people know your story before they even get to the presentation. So that's one less thing that you have to include in the actual webinar itself. And so there's other aspects even in the sales process where instead of it being a part of the presentation, now it's in the post webinar follow-up, whether that's through the emails, whether that's through social media content, whether that's a second kind of like a sub webinar or informational webinar that I have a whole video about my sorority style webinar. So I'll leave that up in the comments if you're curious. But we've been more strategic about every component of the webinar and making sure that we're maximizing it for effectiveness as well as conversions and sales. So translation, you're shortening your webinar presentation, but you're expanding your webinar sales funnel around it. Now let's get into the last major shift when it comes to webinar marketing that you need to keep in mind when you're planning your presentations. And this is to introduce your offer early. So in traditional webinar marketing, most people will wait till the end of the webinar to introduce their offer and to do their sales presentation or their sales pitch. But everyone is not going to make it to the end. So you want to make sure that you introduce your offer early in the sales funnel. So you can do this in your pre-webinar emails. You can do this at the top of your webinar. I always tell my clients, like before, if you're using Webinar Jam, which is what I use for webinars, is what most of my clients use when it comes to webinar marketing. Inside of Webinar Jam, you actually have the feature where you can create a product offer button, and it will show up in a little pop-up with like a graphic inside of your chat within the webinar, right? And so people can just click on that and then go to your sales page. So what I've been doing with my clients is, instead of waiting till you get to your sales presentation and then having your offer at the end, I tell people to actually introduce their offer earlier. Some people do it literally the entire presentation. They'll have that offer button up and people can click on it. Some people will introduce it about 10 to 15 minutes into the webinar. So that way, the people that are there at the beginning are still getting introduced to your offer. And so that makes your sales funnel afterwards a lot more streamlined, and it helps you to boost those conversions. So I would say those are the main shifts when it comes to webinar marketing, is adjusting the schedule or the timing of your webinars. I have never found just-in-time webinars to be that effective in conversions. But even now, I'm noticing with a lot of my clients, a lot of them are seeing better conversions with live, scheduled, or limited time replays of their webinar presentations. In addition to that, you want to shorten your presentation, shorten your webinar. Instead of it being at least 45 minutes to an hour, you want to maximize it at 45 minutes and try to shoot for 30 minutes if possible. You want to make sure that the content of your webinar is more compact. Instead of giving them 3 things that you want to share, narrow it down to just one, the one main thing that people need. Because you're truncating your presentation, you want to make sure that you're expanding your actual webinar sales funnel. And then last but not least is introducing your offer sooner rather than later. So there you have it, you guys. Those are the webinar tips that I have for you for what's working now in this current environment. If you found this video to be valuable, give it a like. If you have any questions about webinar marketing, then you can leave them down in the comments below this video. If you're in market for a new webinar tool, you're wondering what's going to help you convert those visitors into clients, then I do have an exclusive exclusive affiliate link for Webinar Jam. You can get started with it today. If you purchase through my link, you will get a bonus webinar marketing mini course from me that walks you through how to create high converting webinars. I will leave that link in the pinned comments as well as the description of this video. Other than that, as always, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for stopping by my internet home. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, y'all. You can go deeper on this topic by watching the playlist on the top right of the screen. But if you'd rather have me build these systems for you, you can see how you can work with me using the link to the right. Otherwise, watch the video above because it's what YouTube thinks you'll like best.